Step 2. This is Mr. Muhammad Abdullah, your teacher of English, and I'm going to be with you inshallah for our novel David Copperfield. We are going to start from chapter 9, happiness and bad news. So please listen to me very carefully, and we are going to start with chapter 9 to talk about the summary of this chapter. In front of you, there are 5 main points that we are going to discuss and talk about in details. Point number 1, Mr. Murdstone came again to David's life with a big surprise. Find out what happened with David and why Mr. Murdstone appeared again. We all know that Mr. Barker's Biggie's husband had died, so David took Biggity to Mr. Spinlow as a lawyer so that they could find out about his will. While they were there, they met Mr. Murdstone. It was a surprise for David because he found Mr. Murdstone was preparing himself to get married again for the second time. Mr. Spinlow told him that he is going to marry again, but this time for money. So we can understand that he didn't marry Clara, David's mother, just because he loved her or because he wanted to raise up the child as she wanted to, but because of her money, and that's why he is going to remarry again for the second time. Mr. Spinlow after that invited David to have dinner with him at his house, so it was a good chance for David to see Dora again. It seemed that he fell in love with her and that he wanted to know if she would love him in return or not. And that's what tells us about point number 2. David and Dora fell in love with each other. We are going to see if really Dora will love David or not. When he went there, he was able to talk with her and to have a small ride with her in their garden, and he discovered that Dora was also in love with him. So they became engaged. This is only for the two of them, which means that they started to fall in love with each other, but no one knew about their relationship. It was in secret. After that, some situations happened which led to the fact that everyone came to David. They lived with him or they asked for his help. Number 1, his friend Tradless. Of course, now after Mr. Make-A-Whipper left and he took his money, so Tradless didn't have any place to go except to his friend. Also, Biggity is staying with David now. Her husband is dead and she won't find any place except to sit beside David. And the most important thing is that Aunt Betsy had lost all her money because she gave that money to Mr. Wakefield because she believed that he would invest her money for her, but unfortunately Mr. Wakefield lost all the money, and that's why she had become poor. This led us to point number 4. David was in a big problem. He was preparing himself to marry Dora, and he thought that he would find it easy to marry her because of his aunt's money. But now, after she had lost her money, he didn't know what to do. So, the first step, he went to meet Mr. Spinlow so that they could take back the money that they had paid before for his job, £1,000. But Mr. Spinlow refused and said that even Mr. Jerkins wouldn't let that happen. So, step number 2, David had to find a solution for his problem. So he had to look for another job. He found a job as a secretary for Dr. Strong, which means that he is going to start work 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening. He wanted to help his aunt. At the same time, he wanted to help himself to marry Dora. He felt that his dream would be lost. Point number 4, again Mr. Maker-Whipper appeared. He sent a letter to Traddles and asked him to come with David for a dinner at his house at Canterbury. The most important thing that we need to know here is that Maker-Whipper had returned back to work with Uriah Heep. When they went there, they found the family as it is. They were very happy, and Mr. Maker-Whipper told Traddles that he didn't forget about the money that he had taken from him before, and he said that one day he will pay him that money. Now let's go to chapter 10, which starts with David and Dora's marriage was in danger. Their marriage was in danger because of 2 things. Number 1, and this is between David and Dora. David now worked for 2 different places, and he spent most of his time at work, as we said before. So when he went to tell Dora about that, Dora was angry. She was upset, and she was crying because she felt the same. She felt that maybe her father wouldn't accept their marriage, especially that he already knew that Aunt Betsy is now poor. And the most important thing which will make the marriage in danger is that he found out, or Mr. Spenlow found out, that there was a secret relation between his daughter Dora and between David. One day her little dog Jeb took a letter, and Mr. Spenlow saw the dog holding the paper. He started to read it and found out that there were another letters. He asked Mr. Murdstone to bring all these letters, and he asked to meet David. When they met, he told him that he knew all about their relations, and therefore he asked him not to contact or see Dora again, because what he did was wrong. But this is not only the problem. Everything has changed upside down because Mr. Spenlow died, and Dora has to live with her 2 aunts. So she will travel away, and at that time David didn't know what to do. He couldn't contact her. He didn't know about her aunts, and at the same time he was in a big problem. So he went to his best friend Agnes to ask her advice. Agnes helped David, and she gave him a very good piece of advice. She told him that you shouldn't do anything in secret anymore. You should write to the dear ladies and ask to see Dora. Say you will be polite and do whatever they ask. I think it's a good advice. During that time, David met Mr. Biggity, and of course he asked him about Emily. He said that he arrived in London and was ready to go off to Germany to look for Emily. He started in France. And when he didn't find her there, he went to Italy. When he arrived in Italy, they had already gone to Switzerland. He traveled over the mountain, but when he got there, they had already gone. When Mr. Biggity returned back to Yarmouth, he found 2 letters from Emily. She was very sad. She apologized for being so bad, and she asked for his forgiveness. Now, Mr. Biggity was sure that these letters came from London, and that's why he was in London to look for his daughter. Now comes to chapter 11, and it seemed that Agnes's advice was successful, because when he sent for her aunts, for Dora's aunts, they said that he could see her every Sunday afternoon, and then twice for tea during the week. David was very happy, because he is going to see his Dora again. In this chapter, we are going to discover the secret of Mrs. Strong. Of course, we all know that the relationship between Dr. Strong and Annie, his wife, was not a good one. And there was also her cousin, Jack Milden. So, Uriah Heep was the person who discovered that secret, and he said it in front of everyone. David, Mr. Wakefield, and of course Dr. Strong was there. Uriah said that Mrs. Strong is too fond of her cousin, Jack Milden. She goes everywhere with him and is not faithful to Dr. Strong. He also told him that she is a bad woman, and everyone would agree with that. Dr. Strong was not surprised. Why? Because he said that it was his fault. He shouldn't have married someone so young and beautiful, and he said that she deserved the best. So he asked them not to mention that again in front of him, and when he dies, she can marry anyone that she can choose. Now comes to the most important thing in our chapter, point number 3. Finally, David and Laura got married. Time passed, and he was sure that every week he goes to her twice, and after that it was the marriage day. He was about 21 years old. He had work at the Parliament, writing notes. Also, he had a short story printed in a magazine. He found a small cottage near the city, so David was almost ready to get married. His dream had come true. They finally got married. But there was a small problem in their marriage. They couldn't find a housekeeper. Dora was a child, or like a child. She couldn't do the housework, and that's why David had to find and look for a housekeeper. They had always difficulties with servants. They either cheat them or they served them badly. Of course, Dora witnessed all these servants, but she didn't do anything. She even told David one day, "Call me your child wife, and then you won't expect me to act like a real wife. I am really just a child." Of course, David laughed, but when he thought about it, he found out that she was completely right. Dora was a lovable girl, very much like a doll. He had to love her for that and not to expect her to be a proper wife. This is the end of chapter 11. Now let's go to the booklet and look for the model answers of the questions. In chapter 9, question number 1, what was the bad news? How would it affect David? Aunt Betsy lost all her money and she was poor. He would look for another job and his marriage would be at risk. Question number 2, where did David work? How did he feel about his new job? He worked as a secretary at Dr. Strong. He had to work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. He was afraid that his daughter would be lost. Chapter 10. What advice did Agnes give to David? To stop any secret relationship with Dora and to write to her aunts for permission to see her. Question number 2. Comment, you have done a dark and secret thing. You won't see Dora again. Mr. Spinlow to David at his house. The little dog Jeb took a letter from the letters that David sent to Dora. Mr. Spinlow saw it and asked Dora for the rest of the letters. When he saw them, he told David not to contact Dora anymore because what he did was wrong from the beginning. Chapter 11. Call me your child wife. I really am just a child. Comment. Dora to David when they got married but had difficulties with servants as Dora wasn't able to do the housework. Question number 2. What difficulties did they face with the servants? They cheated them and served them badly. Okay, this is the end of the first 3 chapters, 9, 10, 11. And we are going to meet again. Bye.